Orbital Supermax, Episode 5, by Jordan Ellinger. I was in a bad spot. An officer in a prison that had been half destroyed by pirates, in which most of the prisoners had escaped and now wandered the hallways unfettered. Those few criminals whose lives we'd saved still didn't trust me. Wes Morgan, the mercenary that we'd rescued from a prison cell, probably thought I was a fool. And Wyrick? Well, Kayla Wyrick was my therapist. "The cargo hold is this way," I offered when I realized that we were about to miss a turn.
"We're not going to the cargo hold,"
said Morgan without slowing. I asked him if not there, then where, but he ignored me, and I let it drop. No one else seemed to care. The prisoners followed him like young pups following an alpha wolf. Wyrick wouldn't talk to me. She'd disagreed with my decision to turn Martin Browning over to the Nova Dogs. And though I hadn't actually managed to find out who he was in the server room, the fact that I'd looked at all made me a coward in her eyes. As we'd passed deeper into the bowels of the station, we began to hear things through the walls. Quiet coughs coming through the ventilation ducts, but then something else. A low giggling that never seemed to stop, never took a breath. The shifting of papery fabric, the scent of sweat, and the unwashed. Fat Max, the largest among us, if not in muscle, then in pure bulk, stopped dead, blocking the corridor.
"I ain't going in there."
The door ahead of us was riveted steel and painted with a white stripe that bore another red stripe on its back. I recognized it at once. It was the forensic psychiatry wing. A buddy of mine once described it as being like maximum security if the prisoners were tweaking all the time. A man in maximum security might stab you for a toothpick, but a man in forensic psychiatry would stab you if the voices in his head told him you owned a toothpick. These were men who would not survive on a prison world like Quarterdeck, either because they could not take care of themselves or because the other prisoners would kill them out of fear for their own safety. Only a few of them had actually gone insane while they were on the station. Most were simply monsters the other systems didn't know what to do with. Some were sane, but had performed acts so horrendous a jury of 12 reasonable men and women could not comprehend how anyone in their right mind could have committed them. I could understand why Fat Max wanted to avoid the place, but I also understood that I needed to win points with Morgan and Wyrick. I pushed my way to the front of the group and turned around. These men did not look like the hardened group of prisoners we'd found trying to break into the prison armory. They'd seen many of their friends killed in Martin Kilkenny's ambush, and had themselves been threatened with death by a cannibal. They were scared. "What the hell is the matter with you? What's the worst that can happen? Will these guys kill and eat you? 'Cause that's what the guys behind us have promised to do, and we know they're cannibals." Fat Max glared back at me with beady eyes that were made small by the vast slabs of coffee-colored flesh that were his cheeks.
"Go in yourselves, then."
"Fine, but you know what?" I turned and pointed dramatically at Wyrick. Blonde, with diamond ear studs and a pantsuit. She had kicked off her high heels somewhere in the flight deck and now wore nothing but her stocking feet. This woman came here 3 times a week, every week, as part of her job, and she's going back in now. Are you going to let her go in alone? It turned out that several of them would, but more than half decided to come with us, and I figured it was no great loss to leave those others behind.
"I can't decide if I should feel flattered or insulted by that little speech,"
Wyrick said as she slowly advanced into the ward. It was the first she'd spoken to me since I'd used her codes to look up Browning's info. "I'm as scared as Fat Max," I admitted. "It takes courage to do what you do."
"Fat Max stayed behind. You didn't."
I didn't know how to take the compliment. Did she mean that I was earning my way back into her good graces? I was about to continue our conversation, but she'd already walked away. I don't know what I expected forensic psychiatry to look like, but what we found looked very much like a hospital. Medical stations that included defibrillators and firefighting equipment were mounted on the walls, and beds were lined up on one side of the corridor. Each bed had restraints, but they were clean and sterile in nature. We came to a common area with a few scattered tables upon which old-fashioned cardboard board games were laid out. A circle of sofas were arranged around a shattered vid screen, and a line of bloody footprints led from there to one of the doors. There was a medical dispensary behind a sheet of plexiglass on one side of the room, but the door swung on its hinges, and I could see several patients slumped over with dried foam and vomit on their mouths and on the front of their shirts.
Where's the staff?
Asked Morgan. No one answered. We proceeded further into the ward, encountering the occasional patient who was so stoned on prescription medication that they barely acknowledged our presence. Wyrick was no doctor, and there wasn't much she could do for them except try to keep them calm as we passed. Morgan occasionally checked the map on Wyrick's notepad. He seemed to know exactly where his friend was being held. We came to a door that required her to enter her codes again, and for the first time since we'd begun our little journey, she balked.
This is the high security ward. If this is where your friend is incarcerated, he's better off staying here where he can receive treatment.
Herbie's got a condition, but I know how to manage it,
said Morgan defensively.
Herbie?
Asked Wyrick with one eyebrow raised.
You don't mean Herschel Konichek?
You know him?
It wasn't a question, more of an admission of defeat.
As a therapist, I hope he gets treatment. As a woman, I hope he rots in a cell.
Morgan shook his head. Wyrick hadn't asked for an explanation, but he gave her one anyway.
Herbie was one of the best field mechanics I ever knew. One time, our APC was attacked by Vandal. They blew the thing to hell. The damage was bad enough, but he left us for dead. We found Herbie under the wreckage with a 3-inch piece of steel in his forehead. Crazy thing was, he was still able to walk and talk. Except for this piece of metal in his skull, he looked perfectly normal. So there we were, in the middle of hundreds of miles of desert with no vehicle. What were we gonna do? Walk to the nearest town? Well, Herbie took the APC's drivetrain, hooked 2 wheels to it, and we drove out of there on the ugliest motorcycle you've ever seen. When we got back, we took Herbie to the nearest hospital, and it turns out the metal fragment damaged a part of his brain responsible for impulse control. What happened to those women? He knew what he was doing, he just couldn't stop himself. Cut him up inside real bad. I wouldn't wish what he did to his victims on anyone. But he was a victim too. Our unit was all male, so as long as he stuck with us, didn't take any shore leave, he could have a life. Of course, the law caught up to me. Caught up to him too. That's how we got here.
Morgan turned to Wyrick.
The fact is, we need him to fix Nylund's mothballed fighters. I understand you have more incentive than anyone to keep him in his cell, but I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you stay safe. Herbie will know not to cross me.
Wyrick crossed her arms, hugging herself. She looked up at me, and then at the other prisoners. If I was in her position, I'd want to stay clear of Konichek, but there was no way we were getting those fighters operational without some high-caliber help, and she knew it too. Her choice was simple. Agree to free Konichek, or let the rest of us be captured by Kilkenny and his crew. I didn't envy her the decision.
Okay, we release him, but if what you say is true, and Konichek's condition is a result of a brain injury, then he'll never be cured. After all this is over, I want your word that you will bring him back here.
Done,
said Morgan so quickly that I could tell that Wyrick was trying to figure out where she had screwed up. After a moment, she gave up and punched her code into the console. The reinforced door began to slide open and then stopped abruptly, the lights on the panel going from green to orange, indicating that an obstruction was present. It took Morgan and 2 of the prisoners to force it open, and when it finally did, a guard slumped to the ground. His eyes had been pushed into their sockets, and 2 scarlet trails, like scabbed-over tears, ran down his cheeks. The rest of the corridor was coated in blood, more than I'd ever seen in one place. We found a few bodies, but also many empty blood pouches, normally used for transfusions. The stench and rot of copper hung heavily in the air.
Herbie!
Morgan called out, but there was no answer. Somewhere, far away, I thought I heard the beginning of a hysterical laugh that was quickly cut short. We were being sent a message, and we all knew it. This is Captain Bayne. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Episode 5 of Orbital Supermax by Jordan Ellinger. This official Star Citizen lore can be found within the Spectrum Dispatch section of the Roberts Space Industries website. I'll try to keep it short. I have a lot of help putting these episodes together for you. From my dedicated team of voice actors, to musicians who have volunteered the use of their work, and my loyal Patreon supporters who help me pay for hosting and media. To all of you, I'd like to say thank you. I hope I'm keeping you happy with how I make use of your time, effort, or financial support. I'm also fortunate to have such an enthusiastic listener base. I appreciate every post you leave, every like or subscribe you have given me on YouTube. Thank you for the positive ratings on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. All of that helps me fine-tune my work and keep these coming. But if it isn't obvious, my goal is to increase my subscriber base, to bring these lorecasts to more and more people. So please don't forget to share. Send people a link to SCLoreCast.com or my YouTube channel, or whatever works for you. You would be surprised how a few clicks and kind words on your part can open up opportunities for me and my voice actors. It's how we've gotten this far, and it's exactly how we will get further. As always, all the available platforms are listed in the description, and I do truly appreciate any efforts you make on our behalf. I hope you're enjoying what we've provided so far, and I'm looking forward to bringing you much, much more. Thanks for listening, and as always, to all you Star Citizen fans out there, we'll see you in the verse.